sort of things to think about when telling stories to help lead change. So we all tell stories very differently. Everyone brings their own voice to a story, shaped by their own values, their own lived experience. Some people are used to standing on a big stage in front of hundreds of people, making grand speeches. Some prefer an informal conversation or a mix of visual stories or social media posts. And in your team, you're going to have that mix of people, that mix of skills and mix of comfort zones. So one thing to really consider is sort of have you invested in the time and the capacity to be able to tell those stories? So for example, there's a huge change coming in your company. It's a big rebrand or a launch of a new system and way of working. Have you given the consideration that that project needs the time, the space, the resources to be able to tell that story of the why effectively? Or it could be as simple as working in social prescribing, and you're asking all your social prescribers to present stories of change to support ongoing change. And have you given them the time? Have you given them the skills that they need in order to tell those stories? So considering that sort of time and capacity and skills, we feel that there are tools and frameworks that can really help in telling the story and in building the story.
So we've there's a few things that we think about when we're considering our storytelling and narrative, and these are three of the models that we use as reference points, and then we've developed a storytelling model for systems change that I'll share with you in a second.
Yeah.
So the two loop model is just the idea that as an old system, story, or mindset decreases, a new story or system emerges. This is the theory of innovation diffusion, or the change adoption curve, and the idea here is that you focus on storytelling to innovators and early adopters. These are the people who develop new iPads and then queue up outside the Apple Store when the iPad's about to be released. You focus your energy here, and then when you get to about 18% of the population, then you start to build into the majority buying into the new story or the new way of working. And on the right-hand side here, you've got Marshall Gantz's public narrative model, which is this idea of tell the story of self. Why is it important to you? Tell the story of us. Why is it important to us collectively? And therefore, what should we do about it? So I want to share with you our Together Active Future storytelling model for systems change, which combines some of these ideas. And this can be a good framework or a reference point for you to think about, well, what story should we be telling and how should we be telling our stories? So the way that this works is this idea that there's the current frame, as we've touched on already. There's a current story that the world is telling themselves that's built momentum over time, but eventually that story will start to decline and change. And at the same time as a current frame or a current story is emerging and building momentum, even early in that process, you can see a second loop here where new stories are emerging. For example, the current frame of reference, if you want to find new information, is you're going to Google it, right? That's the story. We've even got a word for it, that we're going to Google it and find out. And that's been building now for a long time and gathering momentum. And maybe we're somewhere up here. But for a while now, this new story of we can use artificial intelligence to help us answer questions and to sort through information more efficiently has been building. Artificial intelligence is not new, but you're starting to see now with the rise of ChatGPT, for example, that more and more people are starting to use ChatGPT to ask questions and to access information when they would have previously Googled it. And then we've got two areas here: the how we tell the story and the who are we telling the story to. And these are the two things that we need to think about. So if we're early on in our phasing of a new story, what we're doing is we're seeking for innovators, people who are like you, who have the same values as you do, or the same interests. And when you're talking to innovators, when a new story or a new idea is very new, the story that you're looking to tell is what we'd call a values story. We're not connecting on evidence because there isn't any. We're not connecting on research or fact or processes or structures. We can only connect on values because it's an ideas-based story at the moment. We've got this idea that maybe something can be different, or maybe something should be different. And we're looking for people who are like us, and we're trying to tell stories that bring out our values and allow them to connect with us on a values level, things that we believe in. Once we've got a few innovators together, all the stories starting to gather a bit of momentum, we're going to work with those innovators. So we might be in a group of 6 or 8 or 10 now in our local place or within our organisation. I'm going to start to think about the early adopters. These are people who are going to be fairly easy to win over, who we think, if we get the story right, are going to get on board. And the type of story we're looking to tell to those people is the idea of a collective story. Why will this be good for us? So it's not only what do I believe in, but why will it be good for us as a collective? What's the benefits and values and opportunity for us as a collective? And the idea of the collective story. And so these two types of stories, you might be talking about the same thing, but we're shifting now from something that's potentially deeply personal to something now that's got a bit more structure to it in terms of the collective, what's good for the collective. And I'll come back to some examples later. And then once we've started to build some more momentum, and we're at this tipping point now where the new story is starting to emerge, we need to think about how we're going to get the majority on board, those who've not bought into the new way of thinking or the new story so far. And so that's our model, and one of the things that we kind of encourage, I guess, as with those that we work with, and this is emerging, is to think about those two questions. Who am I trying to tell the story to in the context of where am I in my journey of adoption, if you like? How impactful, or what stage am I at in terms of my this new idea emerging? So the idea of systems thinking, for example, and that we need to change the system is not yet fully accepted by everyone as that's the way forward. We've still got lots of people working in linear program-based, intervention-based models. And so we're maybe somewhere in this stage where we've got innovators and early adopters, but we need to convince the majority that that's the way to go.
So we have created a bit of a storytelling template where we've really taken parts of that model and put it into a template where we can work through stages and considerations before we really start to begin that storytelling journey.